might have got Gruden's permission to reveal it on social media thereafter, but while you were taping the phone call and ultimately revealed that phone call, you didn't let him know at that time, and by the way, that's illegal in the state of California. Can't tape without a consent of both parties. But that's neither here nor there because we know that Gruden wasn't going to do anything about that. The point is, there's some egregious, childish, immature, very selfish acts on the part of Antonio Brown. That is not the case here with Jalen Ramsey.
Let's be clear about something.
That's a different ballgame. Jalen Ramsey wants to get paid, and Jalen Ramsey wants to win. And if you can't do both, how the hell you going to then turn around and still ask him to compromise himself by having him do something that doesn't point to the level of excellence that he could put on display, which would justify the dollars he covets? If the dude is a cover corner and very elite at what he does, and I'm here to tell you, he's got the blessings in terms of the validation aimed in his direction by none other than primetime Deion Sanders. Both of them played at Florida State. Both of them were elite corners. Deion Sanders is the best that I've ever seen. As far as I'm concerned, considering the multitude of things that he does, I think it's a legitimate argument that can be made that primetime Deion Sanders is the best football player to have ever lived. Because how many dudes could do offense, defense, and special teams? Deion Sanders did that. He was an elite returner, kick or punts. He could play wide receiver, just ask Michael Irvin. And oh, by the way, there's unquestionably, he was such an elite cover corner, you literally shut off one side of the football field because he was covering it by his damn self. So if we understand all of that, this arguably is the best to have ever lived. And he's vouching for Jalen Ramsey. Let's keep that in perspective and understand that. Understand that. Jalen Ramsey's right to one out. He's right to ask for a trade. And I think a highlight and a spotlight should be put on what the hell is Tom Coughlin doing down in Jacksonville.
Well, let's be clear about something. Me and my agent, we are not the ones who leaked that information.
When he walks over to get in the face of a player, that's an issue. That means that there's a relationship there. There's no repair for it.
It is what it is. I think everybody, for the most part, knows what's up. And I'm going to focus on what I can focus on.
I don't think, listen, he's handled it terribly, to be quite honest with you.
For all the issues the Jacksonville Jaguars have, and they are plentiful, it doesn't feel like it's not salvageable if they could just get their bleep together.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Smith Show on this Football Friday, ESPN Radio and ESPN News, 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. And if you missed any of the opening segment, go check it out on demand in the Stephen A. Smith Podcast, brought to you by the Capital One Quick Silver Card, earning unlimited 1.5% cash back on every purchase, everywhere. What's in your wallet? And tune in this Sunday for a football doubleheader as the Patriots host the Jets, followed by Texans Chargers, presented by Vivid Seats. Pregame begins at noon Eastern on most ESPN radio stations. You know that Tom Brady, Chris, is going to be playing in that one, of course, this week for the Patriots and the Jets. We alluded to it a little bit there in the open about the tweet that he threw out there last night during that Thursday night game about, I'm done watching this game. Way too many penalties, 15 of them in the first half. And this is from Tom Brady. This is a guy who's protected by the officials as well as pretty much any player in the National Football League. You go near him, they're going to throw a flag for 15 yards. But now if Tom Brady could notice, I think that it's pretty apparent that it's something all of us have kind of kept tabs on here watching football now. It's getting a little ridiculous.
No, they're throwing a lot of flags. Now, early on in the season, there are always going to be emphasis on different rules. The NFL, the referees, the officials, Al Riveron and his staff over on Park Avenue, they're going to be a little flag happy because they want the players to understand what they want the product to look like and ultimately what they're prioritizing in terms of trying to make sure that the game is safer. But, at some point, it does affect the entertainment quality of your product. And so I think over the course of the season, the players will adjust, but also the officials will adjust too, because ultimately this is about making sure the folks that are at home watching it on television, the paying customers in the stand, it's about making sure that they're happy with what the NFL is presenting.
505 accepted penalties through 2 weeks of the NFL season. That's the most over the first 2 weeks of any season in the Super Bowl era. There's a lot. You talk about adjustment, all right? And we know that kind of in a way, as the players are working off the rust the first few weeks of the season, so are the officials, right? Because the speed of a regular season game is different than even the speed of a preseason game. And this is from someone who never played in the National Football League like you can attest to. But you talk about players adjusting, all right? And they have had to do different things and go about it a different way. If you were still playing and now you are in this NFL world, like, for example, now if you're a defensive player and you go and hit the quarterback, you cannot put all of your weight on the quarterback as you're bringing him down. They'll throw a flag. The guy in the Dolphins last year tried to avoid that circumstance. And what did he do? He tore his ACL trying to avoid that circumstance. What are you supposed to do at this point if you're a defensive player?
Well, it's frustrating, right? I mean, Jamal Adams was tweeting out his frustration earlier this week when he got flagged for a Baker Mayfield hit and then fined $21,000 by the league office. So, I mean, clearly players are frustrated, and as a defensive guy, you're just trying to find the happy medium between playing aggressive and make sure you're staying within the framework of the rules and, of course, paying attention to what the officials are emphasizing in that given year. So, I mean, when you look at quarterbacks now, you have to be careful how you hit them, right? It's below the neck area and above the knees. So it's a small strike zone, and when you're talking about having offensive linemen draped over you while you're trying to get to the quarterback, it makes it hard for the defenders to go out there and do their jobs. We had Le'Veon Bell on my local radio show in New York City earlier today, and one of the things that he was talking about was saying that it's almost impossible for the defensive guys to go out there and do their jobs just because the speed of the game has picked up. It's a lot faster than even 5 years ago when he came into the league. But then you also talk about, okay, the rules being changed and how people are making sure that the game is trying to be played safer. The NFL, they're tired of getting sued by former players. They're tired of dealing with being dragged back and forth toward court. And so they put these rules in place to try to make sure that from a liability standpoint, they're absolved from any wrongdoing or potential wrongdoing or any liability. So when I look at this, it's one of those things that it's tough to do for defensive players, but it's one of those things that you have to go out there and try to go do your job at the highest level just because that's the reality of where the game is today.
And there was one in the game last night, too, the roughing the passer call on Correa, right, that they say they got him in the chin area, which I've watched that thing 15 times. I still didn't see that at all. You brought up Jamal Adams from Monday night against Baker Mayfield. My counter to that would be, with the explanation that the NFL gave as to why the flag was warranted and whatnot, okay, what happens if Baker Mayfield didn't throw the football and he was just running out of bounds? Then here, as we're seeing here on ESPN News, what is Jamal Adams supposed to do? Jamal Adams, as he's trying to line up the hit, he doesn't know if Baker Mayfield is going to throw the ball. So if he's a ball carrier, for example, you want to force him out of bounds, don't you? You want to make contact with him.
No, you want to make contact because Baker Mayfield may just pull that ball down. He might pump fake it down the field and then try to get upfield and gain some yards.
Or that.
So it's a tough situation to be in if you're a defender. It's almost as it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. But you have to recognize that this is the responsibility of the defensive players. The onus is on those guys on that side of the ball, and you have to try to figure out a way to make it work within the context of today's rules. Now, I know Jamal Adams says he signed up to play real football, not two-hand touch. But listen, this is today's NFL. You're going to have to make the adjustment. Otherwise, you're going to have to go do something else. So, I mean, as a defensive player, you don't like it, but this situation just is what it is. You have to adjust.
And you think about the Bradley Chubb play from last Sunday.
That one was a little. That
was the weight play, right? They said that he put his weight on him. I mean, and that ultimately contributed to the Denver Broncos losing a football game, which is just unbelievable that now in 2019 you're watching a clip of that and you're saying, how is that roughing the passer? How is that a bad football play? But that's the world that we live in right now with this National Football League. Our own Adam Schefter talking specifically about the Tom Brady tweet and the fact that if somebody like a Tom Brady is going to bring up the penalty issue, it's going to get people's attention.
Tom Brady, who is not exactly known for saying controversial things,
correct,
tweeted out, I've had enough of this game. I'm turning off too many penalties.
Yeah.
When he's doing that, I'm sorry, that has to get the attention of the people in the league. And you saw the numbers of holding calls.
It's ridiculous.
And it just slows down the pace of the game. And I understand they want to enforce it, and I understand they want to watch out for that, and I get all that. But somehow there's a fine line to walk to where you're not calling penalties on every single play, which I guess they can anyway.
And this is an issue. I mean, he brought up pacing there, for example. We know that it interrupts the flow of the game. But this is an issue that we've been dealing with for the last few years. It's not just a 2019 problem. There have been more penalties. There have been more, in my opinion, egregious penalties over the last several seasons than really anything we were exposed to, let's say, growing up as fans of this game.
No, there have been a lot of penalties, and we're sitting there looking at it, and we're saying, well, why is it such a I guess a flag-happy officiating crew every Sunday we go out there and we play an NFL game? But I think the answer to that is the NFL trying to protect its best interests, and ultimately it's the bottom line, right? I mean, when you look at the game, the marquee players in this league, by and large, are quarterbacks. And a lot of the rules are geared toward protecting the quarterbacks because the NFL recognizes that they want to keep those guys on the field. You saw what happened with Tom Brady and the Patriots. What was that, 2008, right after the Super Bowl year where you had the injury and they had Matt Castle have to step in and play the remaining 15 games in the regular season schedule. Well, the NFL realized we've got to make an adjustment. We've got to try to protect our quarterbacks because we don't want those guys not to be on the field.
Agree. And the point you make is good, and I understand it. And they essentially created and drafted the Tom Brady rule. So now you can't go low on the quarterback. You go below the knees, you're done, you're getting the flag. I hear what you're saying, and I do think there is some merit to that because, this week, for example, when you look at the Week 3 schedule, you're going to have 6 quarterbacks starting a game this week that didn't start the previous week. Some of them making their first NFL starts, period. Mm-hmm. Whether or not you want to admit it or not, the star quarterbacks are the stars. They are the attractions in the National Football League. And think of how many big household names are already not going to be out on that field come this weekend, right? I mean, just think about what happened last week when you're talking about Ben Roethlisberger going down. Mm-hmm. You're talking about Drew Brees going down. Andrew Luck said goodbye right before the season started. I mean, Eli Manning is not going to be starting this week, not because of injury, but, that's a guy who's a 2-time Super Bowl MVP. Cam Newton doesn't look like he's going to be able to go. Sam Darnold's injured or whatever. That hurts the overall product of the NFL, not to the point where people are just going to completely not watch, but they are the marquee attractions, and that is how you promote your brand, your game, and I could see the league wanting to protect these guys and keep them on the field. I do get that.
Well, think about it this way. Of the quarterbacks that you just listed and those teams, talk about the teams that are playing. Are those games really that interesting? I mean, when you think about it, with the Jets starting Luke Falk up in Foxborough, is there any interest? Do we have any doubt on the results of that game? No, you don't. And so I think that's why the NFL prioritizes trying to keep these quarterbacks safe, just because you recognize how important those quarterbacks are to impacting their team's chances of winning ball games. It's all about entertainment when we boil it all down. And when you don't have a quarterback, I mean, it's going to make it tough to win in this league. I mean, the rules are geared toward the offense being able to have success. If you don't have a quarterback that can lead your team to being able to score north of 21 points, it's going to be hard for your team to be competitive. And so I think that's why the NFL has had this stance about trying to draft rules and regulations geared toward trying to make sure that these quarterbacks stay safe and that they're protected. Even looking back a couple of years ago with the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers getting injured against the Minnesota Vikings. Right. Outside of the pocket, he was scrambling. Anthony Barr dragged him down. He separated his shoulder. I mean, in that situation, the NFL, right after that season, drafted a rule saying that, you know what, we've got to protect these quarterbacks when they get outside of the pocket. We don't want defenders laying their entire body weight on those guys when they're taking them to the ground. And so you're seeing the NFL impose these rules and try to be proactive about maintaining the health of their quarterbacks because they are the marquee.
Because think about also, just look at this past Monday night, for example, with the Jets and the Cleveland Browns. All right, if the NFL knew, if ESPN knew, the schedule makers knew that it was going to be Trevor Siemian starting a quarterback for the Jets and then giving way to Luke Falk, that would not have been a week 2 primetime under the lights. Are you ready for some football matchup? No. No disrespect to those guys. No disrespect to anybody else on the football team, but it was supposed to be Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, the 2 of the top 3 picks in last year's draft, quarterbacks coming into their own, hopefully teams on the up and up here. It just didn't turn out that way, and it's going to hurt the brand.
No, it's going to hurt the brand, and now you wonder where the Jets go with their season because their quarterback is going to be out for the first 4 or 5 weeks.
You hope he's back after the bye. You hope, but you don't know.
But here's the thing. Even if he comes back after the bye, you could be looking at 0-3 and your season potentially being over. And so you look at them, they have Philadelphia, they've got the Dallas Cowboys, they've got another date with the New England Patriots in Week 7. So you're wondering, okay, this Jets team, their season could be grounded just because you're not having your quarterback, you're missing him for 2 out of the first 3 weeks of the season.
You talk about bad luck with that schedule. I mean, I'm surprised they don't throw in the 85 Bears during the bye week or something just to make it even more challenging for them. Ironically enough, the new starting quarterbacks that there will be in week number 3, all the guys that, for example, didn't play last week under center, all 6 on the road, Chris. How about that? All 6 of them are going to be starting games on the road. We'll get into those matchups, including probably the marquee matchup on this Week 3 slate. That is going to be the one between the Baltimore Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll talk about that coming up next here. It's Dan Gross and Chris Canty. We're in for Stephen A. It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
We all love a night out, whether it's seeing our favorite band or being in the crowd to cheer on our favorite team. With the Vivid Seats Royalties Loyalty Program, you earn credit towards your next live event.